It's a pleasure to talk to you. I've watched every one of your shows, and it's been oddly therapeutic to listen to other people with problems just like me. So,
Thank you
um,
so much. I'm so glad that you've been getting stuff out of it. That makes me so happy.
I mean, that sets up my question to you, which is, I mean, I, I guess it's possible for you not to get something out of it. So, talk to me about, I mean, every show is different, which is
Hmm.
intentional,
Hmm.
and every guest is different, obviously. But
Right.
it's one thing to say I'm going to do a show, and then it's another thing to say, to actually do it. So tell me, just how it feels from show to show after you're actually done, with each show.
Yeah. I mean, um, I think as you said, it's very intentional to have it be such a diverse group of people. Um, oops, sorry, I'm getting a little bit of feedback on my end. Here, one second, let me fix my sound. There we go. Okay, perfect. Uh, yeah, no, I mean, I think there's such a high reward. And one of the things that my therapist always reminds me is like every therapist has their own therapist. So that's something I keep in mind, and to make sure I'm setting boundaries and protecting my own heart and not overloading or taking on other people's stuff, but being able to take care of myself and listen to other people's stories, like there's so much reward in that and so much validation, as you were saying already, um in hearing other people's experiences and hearing how they've gone through them. So yeah, it's such a rewarding and healing thing for
Thing,
sure.
just as someone who's watching and how and I mean, look, I'm not going to ask you why you created it. I've read enough. I think everyone knows. You're how many episodes in? Are you 8?
10. I've done 10 now. Yeah.
10. Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think people know why you went into it, but just the fact, I think you've already accomplished what you wanted to, which is just talking about, mental health, and mental illness, just like we're doing right now,
Yeah,
just like it's just something, and we're all
absolutely.
struggling. And you know I have a therapist. I talk to my friends that I have a therapist, and who gives a shit, you
Right.
know
Right.
and we all have our things. And it's shocking how the fact that you even doing this is, and I mean, obviously I think your name is why it's getting out there, but it's
Hmm.
shocking that the fact that there's a show about this is, would get pressed, the fact that there's a show about this.
Right.
There
Right.
should be this, there should be like hundreds of shows like this.
Right.
So I do commend you on just setting out to do this, using, and you even say it, using your name for good instead of,
I
whatever
was just gonna
else.
say, even when I launched the idea, like I hadn't even put out an episode yet, and people were like, "Oh my god, I love this! Like this is amazing! Thank you so much!" And I was like, "I haven't even done anything.
Right,
Like all I did is make a
right,
post about it." But it
right.
speaks exactly to what you're saying, is that people are so starved for open and honest conversations about mental health that anyone bringing it up in a public forum is really like it's really wanted and needed right now. So I feel super lucky to be able to have a platform to make that happen.
So have you noticed any shift in terms of the show? Like, are you being pulled in any one direction? Because I mean, there's a meme about 2020, that it's the equivalent of like looking both ways before you cross the street, and then you get hit by an airplane. And
Right.
and and I always reference that because that is exactly what this year
Oh
is.
my
And
God. Yeah, no, that's the
unfortunately,
perfect. Yeah, that's
you know,
exactly. Yeah.
and it's not like, magically 2021 is going to come and everything's going to be, glitters and unicorns.
Right.
But do you notice any kind of shift with the show, like topics or themes, or are people approaching you to be on? I mean, for themselves to be a guest on the show, for example.
Right. Oh, I mean, absolutely. The show was. The show wouldn't have happened had 2020 not, been the year that it's been. I created it during the pandemic. At the very beginning of the pandemic, I came up with the idea when I was feeling super isolated in quarantine, because I had to leave college and quarantine, you know? So I think just even that in and of itself is the reason that the show was created in the first place. But since then, definitely, like, I've been wanting, like, intersectionality to be a huge part of what I'm doing, just from the get-go, you know, because mental health access, like mental health care and mental health resources is so inaccessible, but it's especially disproportionately accessible for marginalized communities, for Black, Indigenous people of color, and statistically they struggle with mental health exponentially more. So that was already a conversation I wanted to be part of it. And then after the murder of George Floyd, and then being in Seattle and being pretty active in protests and in the movement going on in the Capitol Hill Occupy protest, just realizing, like, having more of a firsthand understanding of what you know, the trauma that must be a huge part of what's going on right now for Black Americans, and so that's definitely, like, wanting to put more emphasis on what mental health looks like for different groups and different communities. Yeah. So, and obviously with the election coming up too, like, that's something that a lot of the interviews that are going to be coming out in the next couple of weeks are focused on the implications of, you know, political stress and how that's affecting all of our mental health right now as a nation. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I mean, what a great year for your first election to vote for. You know, to vote
Yeah,
in,
I will never forget that. There's no way, as much as I may want to.
I mean, and that's another encouraging thing. You know, a lot of people, and I guess I fall into this, especially. It's kind of hard not to, you know, text your friends or post really negative shit on Facebook or anywhere, any platform, you know, relating to the election. But you know, seeing what you're doing, and you know, what some of your friends are doing and other things, there is kind of a glimmer of hope. And there's a little glimmer of hope with, like, the protests, you know, and can you find any hope? Can you find any, you know, signs of light? Because it is very hard. And, you know, when it comes to Corona, there's no answers. And to be perfectly honest, there's really no answers when we have, you know, Trump in office, because, you know, he's going to have to put his big boy pants on if he loses. Right. And can you find any light?
Yeah, I mean, this show is like a source of hope for me. And I'm coming, you know, I'm coming at everything from a very, very privileged position. You know, experiencing white privilege, experiencing the ability to have a therapist and the ability to have a psychiatrist, and have a family situation where I'm able to be open about what I'm struggling with, and you know, so in that regard, like, I have a lot of hope, but I'm also coming at it with a lot of privilege, you know, and in a situation that may feel more hopeful maybe, but I don't know, something that, like, I talked about Dr. Mark Brackett, or I talked with Dr. Mark Brackett about this in my second interview, about how this, like, mental health is something that's being talked about more and more, you know, and as you said too, with the protests, I mean, I think they just decided yesterday to defund the Seattle City Council vetoed the mayor's veto, and they're officially defunding the Seattle Police Department. And so that's, like, seeing this very tangible forward movement, and that these conversations are being opened up, and as horrible and brutal as it is, and as awful as it is that it took these gnarly events to get us here, like, it feels like there's shift, like there's forward momentum in some way. So that's hopeful to me. And it's kind of a double-edged sword of hope, because it's coming from a lot of really horrible things, but it's still happening, you know. So that's something, at least.
I mentioned social media, and I mean, your show is on, you know, a social media platform. Now, I will make the argument that it's the best of the three in terms of not getting pounded with political stuff.
Right.
But is it kind of difficult to block out that noise? I just get anxiety thinking about Facebook. I deleted it off my phone, which
Sure.
for me is a huge breakthrough, and I replaced it with Headspace.
Right.
So, which I thought was a huge win for me. And so I'm just curious.
That's a win. That's a win.
That's a win, right?
Yeah.
But in terms of where you're at, you're on this. There's so much communication. And there's so much being thrown at us, and looking at the wrong thing can just set your anxiety level at an all-time high. Is it difficult running on a platform that it can just raise at least it does for me, I don't know.
Yeah, no, definitely. And that's something that I try to be intentional about even before I launched the series, is being like, okay, I'm gonna have to start spending a lot more time on social media. So what are ways that I can curate my space to feel more uplifting than it is, like oppressive in a way. And so that's something that I try to be intentional about, like unfollowing accounts that no longer served me. But it is social media, and of course you're going to get some sort of influx of information, but that's going to happen whether or not you're on social media. I mean, if you don't live under a rock, you know what I mean? Like that's kind of the nature of 24-hour news cycle capitalist society that we're in. But I mean, I think that there's a way to make social media a place that is more helpful than harmful, depending on what site you're on. I'm not on Twitter and I'm not on Facebook for that reason. Like I don't use those social media platforms because they're tend to be more volatile and a little bit more negative. But like on my Instagram, like I follow my closest friends, and then I follow a bunch of accounts that are focused on healing from PTSD, or like anxiety, how to cope with anxiety and depression, or like support group kind of things, and then also a bunch of accounts on like anti-racism and BLM, and so being on social media feels like an informative and active experience versus like a very passive negative one.
Right. I mean, you could make it work for you instead of the other way around. Yeah.
Exactly. Which is exactly, and sometimes that means just not being on social media. Sometimes that means deleting Facebook and downloading Headspace. Like that's sometimes what that is. So that's, I think it can be dealt with in a, personally on a case by case basis.
So what are some of your outlets, besides your show? Like, obviously you kind of come from music royalty, what music for me is always my outlet, right? So like that's my go-to, aside from like binge watching Schitt's Creek and stuff.
Right.
Music is like always my go-to. Is music a go-to to you? Like where do you turn to when you just kind of want to completely escape?
Music has always been, I mean, since I was little, it's not like a new thing. Music has always been my safe place. It's, I've had anxiety my entire life, and it's always been something that's helped calm me down. And in more recent years, playing music, writing music with friends, that's been a huge thing for me. So yeah, definitely. And music is universal in that way, and that it's a universal language and has the ability to make people feel. But I think, my parents could be like farmers, and I would still, like, music would still be like the number one thing in my life. So definitely that for me. Boxing is another huge one that helps me externalize a lot, and helps with my anxiety a lot. Trying to combat some of that isolation, I make it a very deliberate thing to, like, I'm living with roommates now, so now some of my best friends from college, so I'm able to have a little bit more social time, but especially in quarantine, being like, okay, I'm like one person every day, and make sure I'm not falling into that trap of isolation, is something that I try to be really cognizant of. So
I do, just jumping back to your parents, I do like that you have your mom and your dad kind of stamped on your show, like with the Alice in Chains intro and the namesake for your dad. And I do also want to say that, you know, when you Google your show, it's always Chris Cornell's daughter. I think this is just you. You know what I mean? Like this is your show. And I'm also very cognizant, like, you know, I don't want to ask you any questions about your dad. You know, this is your thing. And, you know, I loved and admired your dad. And, you know, we can talk about your dad's stuff, but this is your thing. So,
thank you. No, I appreciate that. And honestly, because that's of course always how I've been marketed in a way, is Chris Cornell's daughter. And sometimes like it's frustrating, as I think it would be frustrating to anybody, but also like I've talked about this before, but I have such a privilege in being born with a platform that most people don't have. And if labeling me as Chris Cornell's daughter is what opens conversations about mental health, you know, and about intergenerational trauma and about PTSD, like, so be it. You know what I mean? Like, it's not about wanting to create a name for myself and be a public figure. It's about wanting to open these doors and create accessible healing for everybody. So if that's what pushes it out there, that's what pushes it out there. You know what I mean? And it's something that's was near and dear to my dad's heart, you know? And so, if that's something that can be associated with his legacy, like, that's an honor for me.
Let me close out with this. Let me close out with this, because this is what I hope happens, because, you know, I do this, you know, usually in person, and like I said, I hate this Zoom shit. I mean, it's really, listen, it's lovely sitting down and talking with you. Like, don't get me wrong, I love it. I love it.
I hate this.
Fucking hate it. I'm shutting my computer. No, I love having any kind of human interaction with anybody.
Totally.
But the whole face-to-face thing is obvious.
I get it. No,
you know what I'm saying. So,
of course.
So but after this is over, you know, whenever that might be in 2029, it would be awesome, because I want to go back to, you know, having my sit-down interviews and, you know, having a cup of coffee and not feel like if I sneeze, everyone's going to wince and run out of the room. But are you thinking, or can you, you know, envision, you know, your show where you're just hanging out on the couch? And obviously, you know, I'm not talking like, you know, a Stephen Colbert thing where you're sitting at the desk thing, because the thing that I love about what you're doing is you're having a conversation with somebody. You don't pretend to be an expert, and as you learn, we learn, right? That's the whole thing that you're doing. But do you envision like kind of just chilling out on the couch with somebody and talking, or do you think it'll kind of continue as you know, Hollywood Squares?
No, that's absolutely a goal for me. I think whatever works for whatever can make it most accessible, you know what I mean? Like, that'll always be my goal. But, you know, I have been working with some really cool people talking about like doing, you know, pop-ups and events in the future when we're able to. And like, one of my biggest goals is like, you know, it just thinking about the ways that once we are back to a new version of normal, the ways that we can continue to promote the conversation around mental health beyond just social media. So definitely in-person interviews would be amazing and something that I think would elevate the experience for sure. But even beyond that, I think once we kind of get a handle on this, if we get a handle on this, there will be even more ways to talk about mental health and kind of open up that conversation. So.
This sound, I want it to surround me. Play it loud, play it loud, play it loudly. Bass around we go. Bass press play on life and here we go.
There's going to be a new wave of PTSD from this.
Exactly. No, and it is a global trauma, and that's something that, you know, I'm not saying that just like in my opinion, like that's something that I've heard from a number of mental health professionals, you know, it's and people who haven't experienced trauma or maybe don't have vocabulary around what trauma is, a lot of the time don't realize that that's what we're experiencing right now, and we're, you know, experiencing a number of global traumas right now, and so people are experiencing, you know, people are having effects from that. People can't sleep, people are having super gnarly dreams, you know, or like they're forgetting things, or suddenly like they don't want to leave their house, or, you know, and people who maybe don't have the vocabulary around what trauma is, or like, oh my God, something's wrong with me, you know, and so that's what part of what opening this conversation up is so important to me, because of that, because we're in this time of crisis, and people are, you know, suicide rates are rising, but also people seeking mental health care is rising. And as you said, you know, there's new PTSD coming from this. There's new mental health issues coming from this. So it'll be a conversation that needs to continue to be had, for sure.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Lily. I think you're awesome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for your support. It truly means so much.
Yeah, awesome. Keep doing it.
Thank you.